Week 8 of the Contender Series is upon us as we've had some pretty fun fights throughout this season 9 with only 3 events left and some intriguing prospects still to come. I'm very much looking forward to breaking down these last 3 cards for you guys as we get through these weeks. And I do quickly want to say I was supposed to drop this yesterday, but it didn't seem like any odds were available until the evening, Sunday evening. So I really wanted those to settle out a little bit before I actually drop this breakdown, because I don't like dropping breakdowns where odds are one way and then by the time you guys view them, the odds are completely gone a different way. I want to be as current and accurate as possible with some of these odds. Obviously on fight day, you might see a little bit more of a swing, but at least this way, we don't get these openers where people are just blasting them for $100 limits, and then we see it, the line just go a completely different way. So that's why I waited out on it. That will also impact my UFC 320 breakdown, which won't come out until Tuesday now. So I'm just pushing everything back just about a day or so, just to compensate for, the lack of swiftness from the odds makers to drop the Contender Series odds for you guys. But we do have them. Some fun fights, interesting card. I do quickly want to talk about week 7, though, before we get into the breakdowns for week 8. I like just giving my quick thoughts on some of these fights and some of the fighters that earned contracts. So, Rafael Tobias going out there and absolutely squashing Jair de Oliveira. Seemed like a pretty straightforward fight. I thought Tobias was playing with his food a little bit too much. I thought if he took that fight to the ground sooner, he probably would have gotten the finish even quicker, but he wanted to try to get that knockout, and when it didn't come, that's when he went for the takedown, which came with such ease, and then he was able to quickly work to a rear naked choke position. And, he looks UFC ready. He's very solid, very skilled, 14-1 record. I look forward to seeing what he can bring to the 205-pound division. Then we had Javier Reyes knocking out Justice Torres in just about 2.5 minutes. Normally Reyes a little bit of a slower starter, but he put his foot on the gas almost immediately and eventually was able to hurt Torres. It didn't seem like Torres had much success at all in that fight, and we saw Reyes really just put it on him and eventually get him out of there. So great win for Reyes. And another guy that is UFC ready with 27 fights of pro experience. He's a guy you can throw right into the 145-pound division, and he could rack up some wins already. Then we had Jesla Chavez going up against Sofia Montenegro. Close-ish fight, but I thought Montenegro squeezed that one out, as did Dana, hence why he ended up giving her a contract too. But I think even if Montenegro did get her hand raised, Dana would probably give Chavez a contract as well. And I do want to credit Chavez. Her tape made it seem like she was just being force-fed, or not force-fed, but like given these very low-level opponents, and she looked really good in a lot of those fights. But again, a lot of that can be skewed because of the level of competition they're going up against. But she really showed up against an uber aggressive Montenegro who, from jump, it seemed like Montenegro was going to just be in control of this fight completely, but it really seemed like Chavez was able to gut it out through that early adversity and then really start getting some success of her own. So credit to Chavez for outperforming what a lot of people expected of her. Obviously she pulled off the upset, so I'm sure there was some parlays that ended up crashing, but I think Montenegro has a little bit higher of a ceiling than what Chavez brings to the table. Then we had a little bit of an unfortunate matchup here between Murtazali Magomedov and Brian Zurcher. Now, I was on the Zurcher side and obviously bet him as well. And I was a little bit underwhelmed in the fact that we didn't really get to see this fight go a little bit longer, because I thought it would have been very competitive, and I feel like it could still be competitive should they have rematched, which I highly doubt will happen. But I'm seeing a lot of things about people saying that Zurcher is a fraud, Zurcher sucks, Zurcher has a horrible chin. I think if you actually go back and watch the fight properly, especially the finish, you see that the jab of Magomedov actually puts Zurcher off balance. I don't think he was necessarily all that hurt, nor do I think he has a bad chin, but Magomedov, seeing that he has Zurcher on the retreat, goes out there and just throws all of his power into all these strikes, and that's what ultimately ends up leading to that finish there. I think Zurcher didn't react the best in terms of, just trying to get back to his feet and then circle out off the cage, and then kind of just backing up into the cage, gave Magomedov the entry to get in on those big shots, and I think that big shot is ultimately what got Zurcher the finish, but it wasn't the jab. The jab, I think, just put Zurcher more off balance more than anything, sent him backwards, but I don't think that was the the seminal shot that caused him to go out. It was the follow-up shots where Magomedov thought he had Zurcher hurt more than he did, and then he ultimately swarmed him with some big strikes there. So I think Zurcher will be back. I think he's too good for the UFC to pass up. I don't know if he'll get a short notice opportunity or if he'll eventually go back to the Contender Series next season, but the kid is very talented, and so is Magomedov. Credit to him for capitalizing on that scenario and getting the win. So again, I feel like the fight still would have played out much closer than people are making it seem after the fact, but we'll never find out. And that's kind of just the MMA game. So good signing for Magomedov there as well. Then we had a great main event here between Montez contra Vicious, going out there and knocking out Danny Barber in a minute, just about a minute actually. I was happy to get underdog odds on Contra Vicious, and obviously some solid money on the under 1.5, which I expected to cash no matter who ended up getting their hand raised. So great win from Contra Vicious. A little bit faster, a little bit slicker. Ended up landing that big shot on Barber and putting him away. So very good addition to the middleweight roster. And very happy to cash that ticket there. So we did profit ever so slightly as we had Javier Reyes. We had Montez contra Vicious. We also had the under in the contra Vicious fight. And then we lost a little bit on the Zurcher. So a Zurcher bet, but still profited on that card. So I'm very happy about that. Let's see if we can keep that momentum rolling into this week's Contender Series card. I do quickly just want to plug that we have a few other events going down this week. Friday, we got PFL. I'll have the video out to break down that card for you guys on Wednesday, so stay tuned for that. Then I'll have... I have OKTAGON 77, which will only be in written form on the Lock of the Night Patreon page. I'll also have Cage Warriors 195. That breakdown won't come out until Friday, so stay tuned for that. And then we obviously have the big UFC 320 card, and you guys already know that I drop a ton of content on the YouTube channel for the UFC events. So make sure you guys hit that subscribe if you haven't already. I just got over the 9,200 subscriber mark, far cry from the 10,000 subscriber goal that I had when I started the Contender Series this season. It's going to be hard to get to that number, but if you haven't already hit that subscribe, it would mean a world to me, like just absolutely everything to me to try to across that line of getting that milestone of 10,000 subscribers. So I don't think we'll hit it by the end of the season, but hopefully by the ending of the year. If you haven't already, please hit that subscribe. That would be amazing. All right, let's start off with the first fight of the night here for the Contender Series Week 8 breakdowns, where we got Rashid Vagabov coming in at minus 525, going up against Paulo da Silva, who comes in at plus 410. Now, starting off on the Vagabov side of things, he only has 2 losses in his entire career, and both of those losses came against guys that were undefeated at the time. Since then, he is on a 5-fight winning streak now, with 4 of those wins coming by finish. As you would expect from a guy hailing from Dagestan, he wants to utilize his wrestling and his grappling to secure that top position, and earlier in his career, he was kind of struggling to try to get those finishes, but recently, especially his last 4 fights, working for those finishes and putting his opponents away and putting stamps on these performances as well. He's done a great job in terms of transitioning from that takedown to a dominant position and then either getting that ground and pound or looking for submissions. He's actually split all of his victories, 4 of them by knockout, 4 of them by submission, 4 of them by decision, and then we actually have 1 DQ win on there from the second fight of his career. He's one of Ali Abdelaziz's guys from Dominance MMA, so you often see him with Khabib Nurmagomedov or Manal Kape, training at American Top Team or training at the UFC PI. He's been all over the world, and he has a ton of experience against high-level opponents. His striking is obviously coming along, and it's good enough to help feed the rest of his game, which is mainly fueled by his grappling. And I love that he's becoming more aggressive and actually looking for finishes. He's going up against Paulo da Silva, who is a training partner of former lightweight champion Charles do Bronx Oliveira, and he brings a little bit more of a muzzled approach than what Oliveira brings, but still somewhat aggressive. I came across him back in May when he debuted for LFA, and he was able to pull off the upset as a plus 130 underdog in a very close fight that he won by split decision. that night. He was struggling with the takedowns and grappling of his opponent, but when he was able to get back to his feet, whether it was by himself or by the referee stand-up, he was able to get off on his Muay Thai, and I believe that's what the two judges that scored that fight for him ended up seeing and ended up scoring, allowing him to get his hand raised that night. He has faced some very sketchy competition throughout his career. I believe the combined record of his opponents at the time of facing them, excluding his LFA opponent, is 10-26, which is a very low-level mark, going out there and squashing most of these guys. And we obviously know, as we've seen through the past 7 weeks, that type of experience does not help at the UFC level or the Contender Series level, and will only work against you. And obviously, I think we're going to see De Silva face that here as he faces the toughest opponent of his career in Rashid Vagabov. I'm fully expecting Vagabov to do what he wants in this spot. I don't think it'll take him all that much to get in on a takedown attempt, and I think he'll actually be able to smash through De Silva's guard, and I think he'll be able to get that finish within 1.5 rounds here. Parlaying him at minus 525 is not a bad idea, considering the poor takedown defense and even his striking game of De Silva. It's not that, it's not anything super threatening. And I expect Vagabov, with a way tougher strength of schedule, a way better all-around game. I really expect Vagabov to get this to the ground, and I'd kind of be surprised if he can't get that finish within 7.5 minutes. So the under 1.5 at the time of this recording is roughly around plus 130, plus 150, depending on your bookie. But I think that Vagabov will do a good job in getting that finish and securing that finish probably within the first round. So I expect the chalky favorite to roll in this first fight. Next up, we got the Pink Panther, Curtis Campbell, coming in at minus 400, taking on Seck, who comes in at plus 330. Now, I did watch the face-offs or the weigh-in face-offs first before I got into this breakdown, and I was like, who the hell is this nerdy British kid, and why was he a minus 400 favorite against a guy that looks like he was chiseled out of granite and looks like he has a ton of power and could probably put this kid away? That is until I saw the footage and I watched the tape and I did my research on Campbell, and I was blown away by what I saw from this 7-0 FCC champion who was already defended his title twice. He went 8-1 as an amateur, with his only loss coming to Liam McCracken, who, if you know, you know. So it's not a bad loss to have on Campbell's record, but he has pretty much gone out there and dominated almost every opponent that he's gone up against. For the majority of tape that I watched on this kid, I didn't see him in a losing position whatsoever. There was one fight, I believe it was against Matthias Lima, where he got a little bit too overzealous on the back of Lima. He slipped off the top, but within 5 to 10 seconds, he had already secured the position once again and pulled off a reversal. He is a Muay Thai and grappling specialist with great calf kicks, which he's finished one of his opponents with in just 45 seconds. But also his grappling is probably the highlight of his game because of his ability to control opponents and with those takedowns. He's very sneaky with getting in on those double legs or even just chaining other attempts together. But once he gets the takedown, he's very good in terms of securing positions, really controlling opponents, and staying a step ahead the entire way. It must be very frustrating for opponents to have to deal with a guy that just knows what your next move is going to be and beating you to that point before you get there. He moves his hips very well in terms of that grappling sequence. So like if his opponent is trying to roll out of a full mount position or trying to roll out of the back, he rides it very well and often stays, not even often, almost always stays in that top position and that dominant control, showcasing how high level his game is. He trains out of, I believe it's Liverpool Combat Academy, which is not a super well-known gym, at least at this level, but it's clearly working out for him. Great coaches, solid training partners. This kid looks like the goods and looks like somebody that could be a very big force in the featherweight division in the UFC. Now, he's going up against a very athletic, very physical fighter here in Seck, who solid record, but the level of competition he's going with on the regional African scene, very low level. And that's where you can often see him, getting the better of some of these opponents. He did go life and death with the guy that was 2-2, barely winning that fight on the scorecards. And that fight, wasn't even that long ago. I think that was only his second last fight. Since his last defeat, which was 2 years ago to Vince Bembe, he's won 6 straight fights, 5 of those coming in the first round. And his last one was actually a chance to avenge that loss or get revenge against Vince Bembe, and he knocked him out in 23 seconds. It seems like he landed a big shot right off the bat there, and it really hurt Seck, and it really hurt Bembe, and Bembe really couldn't get anything back together there. And again, like I said, he just finished him in 23 seconds. Seck has utilized some grappling in the past, but it doesn't look all that great. Even in his first loss, which was just 3.5 years ago, we saw him get constantly reversed by his opponent. Then he had no answer off of his back. On the feet, he's a little bit too wild. He throws with a lot of power, is easily countered, often overextending on a lot of his punches. It's really just his athleticism and physical traits that have gotten him this far in his pro career. But I know as he faces tougher competition on the Contender Series, or if he is somehow able to make it to the UFC, we're going to see those parts of his game really start to get exposed. And he's really up against it here against Campbell. Now looking at the face-off, you're probably just like, Seck is probably going to whoop this kid's ass, but I don't think that's going to happen at all. I think we're going to see Campbell get his takedowns. He's going to get those positions that he needs, and I think that will eventually lead to him getting a submission victory here. So, Seck might be able to power his way out of some of these spots early, but I think it's just a matter of time before Campbell gets in on a takedown again, and he just slowly starts zapping that gas tank of Seck, and that should lead to a second-round submission for the Brit here. So I'm going to go Curtis, and Curtis by submission, and I'm very much looking forward to seeing what he looks like in the UFC as he takes steps up in competition there. All right, next up, we got Elizer Kubanza coming in at -270, going up against Christopher Alvidrez. Alvidrez, apologies, who comes in at +230. Now, I'll start off on the Kubanza side of things, who represents Congo and has put together a clean 7-0 record since turning pro back in November of 2021. His last 4 fights have come under the Brave CF banner, where he's faced some solid competition and showcases that he can really put it on some of these guys. The combined record of his opponents at the time of fighting them is 20-4. So he's faced solid competition throughout his career. He has big power in his hands. His grappling is pretty good as well. And he's done a great job in terms of going into deep water and still being very successful and showcasing that he can still produce very big power in those spots. Although he's intimidating and has power in the striking realm, he doesn't really command respect right off the bat. He almost lets his opponents kind of dictate the pace in the striking realm, and once they start letting go with some combinations, that's where we often see Kubanza start to change levels, get fights to the ground, and then start beating his opponents up from there. He's a BJJ purple belt, trains in Bali at Soma Fight Club, which is home to guys like Anshul Jubli and some other regional fighters that maybe some guys may not know. But if you're hardcore, you know some of his training partners there. And he goes up against Christopher Alvidrez, who trains out of Miami, formerly in the Goat Shed. But from what I'm hearing, Goat Shed is no longer a thing, although... what's the guy's name? Azim Zaidi, I could be butchering his name, the president of Karate Combat, is still in his corner, even though the gym is not as, is not something from what I've been able to uncover. Alvidrez rides a 5-fight winning streak, with his only loss coming from his second pro fight, which was under the Combate Global banner. That night, which is kind of the era in Alvidrez's career where he was relying more so on grappling and looking to utilize his physicality to really wear opponents down and look for submissions. But that night, when he suffered his first defeat, he was struggling to really establish dominant control, and then on the feet, he started to get busted up by his opponent and even got taken down a few times by his opponent and busted up from that top position. Since then, like I said, undefeated, a couple of fights under the LXF banner where he got fed complete tomato cans and he was able to really just butcher them and, let go with his big power and really wear them down from there. And he really hasn't looked to his grappling as much in this stage of his career compared to his first couple of fights as a pro. His biggest win was his last one where he defeated Takashi Sato, former UFC fighter. It was a competitive fight. Up until that point, Sato looked for a takedown, and mid-air we saw Alvidrez actually switch his hips and reverse the takedown attempt and end up in top position. And that's where he really started to land his big shots, land his big power. And that's where we see Sato start to break and Alvidrez eventually start to muster up more success, landed more power when the fight got back on the feet, and he was able to overwhelm Sato, leading to a finish with about, I believe, 4 seconds left on the clock in the first round. Alvidrez is athletic, he's physical, he has some good power, but I think he's really up against it here against Kubanza, who should be able to get the respect of Alvidrez almost immediately. I feel like I'm butchering. I'm going to go with Chris. I feel like I'm butchering his last name. I could be off on it here, but we're going to go with Chris for Alvidrez here. But I think Kubanza will be able to land those big shots on Alvidrez. On Chris, goddamn. I'm so used to just saying last names for fighters, so I apologize. But the one thing I hate more is butchering their names as well. I want to give them the respect they deserve by having their names pronounced correctly. But Kubanza should be able to bust up Christopher here, land some big strikes. I think we'll see Chris eventually start going for takedowns, which I don't think will be, or at least bear any fruit here. I think that will lead to Kubanza reversing those positions, really breaking Chris down, and I think that will lead to Kubanza eventually finding that big shot to put Chris away. So I think chalk comes through for the third straight fight here as Kubanza gets a second or third round TKO. All right, probably, actually, I lied. I was about to say this is the most competitive fight on the card, but I'd say the main event is. But we still have a fun fight here in the bantamweight division between Jourdain, who comes in at -160, going up against Magno Diaz, who comes in at +140. Now, Jourdain, obviously, or Jourdain, Louis, for my French folks out there, is the brother of Charles, who has obviously had a very solid UFC career, is a big fan favorite, and his brother brings some of the same types of skills. Now, I think Charles is a little bit more reckless and more willing to put himself in danger compared to Louis, but Louis is still very solid. Quick story time here. Now, the first time I came across Jourdain was actually in his last amateur MMA fight where he went to a draw against a guy named Hashmat Sarwari. I was actually in the corner of Sarwari because that was back in my days where I was a general manager at an MMA gym in the Toronto area. Sarwari was one of our better amateur fighters, and there were times where I would travel with some of the fighters to either help out with whatever they needed, whatever the coaches needed. But for that instance, I was actually in the corner and helping out in that aspect, and that was probably one of the best fights I had ever seen. Now, I don't know if it was because of how close I was, just being cage side and obviously in the corner going in and out of the cage. But very back and forth fight. Obviously, we saw the result there. Went to a draw. Both guys had tremendous success. Crazy scrambles, crazy reversals, great striking from both guys. And that's the night where I learned about the Jourdain brothers. And in Ontario, we had the Laramie brothers, TJ and Tony. And then in Quebec, they had the Jourdain brothers, Louis and Charles. And I learned about them that night, obviously. Louis obviously not having as successful of a MMA run as Charles did. Louis ended up jumping around a little bit from different sports, from boxing to MMA and back. Had a few losses sprinkled in there, but he's finally managed to put together a 3-fight winning streak now and gotten the eye of the UFC brass. I'm sure Charles helped with that a little bit, but it was on Louis to get that winning streak going so that he could earn this opportunity. Very slick striking. Obviously, just as his brother, his takedown defense was kind of the lower part of his game, but he's slowly improved that. From utilizing his BJJ off of his back, creating reversals, creating scrambles so that he can get back into the striking realm. And then obviously his striking and his cardio is very high level, which is why it's hard for a lot of opponents to keep up with him and why he ends up finishing these guys. He's going up against Magno Diaz, who is a Fighting Nerds representative and looking to get that team back on track after some recent woes to some of their captains there. Diaz is 6-1, riding I believe, 3-fight winning streak at this time. His lone defeat is probably one of the most bizarre things that I've ever seen while studying up on a fight. That night he got caught in a couple of guillotines, but it was the final guillotine that he ended up being forced to tap to. But there was a weird circumstance where his opponent got the guillotine, had had his legs wrapped around the waist there of Diaz, and as he's torquing and trying to create that leverage to get the tap, he was pulling Diaz's shorts down, and you were getting full mooned essentially. There were moments where the referee was trying to help Diaz by pulling up his shorts while Diaz was trying to defend the choke. Then there was a point where the referee just kind of stopped the fight to let Diaz kind of deal with the wardrobe malfunction. And then, unfortunately for Diaz, he had to be put back into that guillotine position when the action resumed. And it happened again where his ass was pretty much all up in the air, bare and all. And he ended up going to his back, and I think that was kind of one, to try to defend from the choke, but two, to not flash the rest of the crowd. And then obviously that just made it deeper, and his opponent was eventually able to force the tap there from Diaz. So very unfortunate circumstance for you to have your lone defeat in, but the fact that he continuously got caught in the guillotine on numerous times throughout that fight, that maybe would have led to the finish anyway. He's aggressive with his striking. He has some decent hands, decent kicks. He likes to get to the grappling game, but he's a little bit over aggressive there. He doesn't often secure positions all that well, often going submission over position and often failing on those submissions. There's nothing special about the kid, in my opinion, right? Like, sure, he trains with the Fighting Nerds, but there's really nothing on his record that makes me scream like this kid deserves to be in the UFC. After seeing the weigh-ins as well, the stare downs, Jourdain has a big size advantage here over Diaz, and I think that's going to help him kind of thwart the grappling that Diaz might look to exploit in this matchup. I think Jourdain is the better striker. I think he's more well-rounded, and even though Jourdain only has 4 more pro fights than Diaz, Jourdain has been a lifelong mixed martial artist. I've known about this kid for 15 plus years at this point in time. I think it was 15 years ago. No, sorry. I think the fight took place in 2012, 2013. I could be off on that when he fought Sarwari, but again, even before that, he already had plenty of fights before as an amateur. That experience is going to come in handy here against Diaz, and I think that will eventually lead to Jourdain getting that finish. So I do like Jourdain a good bit here. He was minus 145 yesterday. He's about up to minus 160 now. I saw minus 180 on the book, so it seems like that line is slowly starting to drive up. But I do like Jourdain here pretty good, and I think he eventually finds that finish over Diaz, probably in the second round. The under 1.5 currently sits at plus 165. We're going to see if we can get an alternate total on the 2.5, or the fight doesn't go to decision. If they're anything better than minus 120 or even money, I'd probably take a shot on the under as well, because I expect this fight to be quite chaotic. All right. That brings us to the main event of week 8 now, and it is between Vitor Costa, who comes in at plus 110, taking on Damian Pinas, who comes in at minus 130. Now, Costa is another Fighting Nerds representative, and he's looking to obviously reverse the fortunes of what that team has been going through as of late as well. He just turned 25 last week. Has not lost a fight since his pro debut back in June of 2021. He came up short against eventual UFC signee Cesar Almeida that night. Costa has finished 6 of his 8 wins, with 4 of them coming in the first round. He showed a solid love for guillotines in 3 of his 8 wins, but recently he's really been trusting his hands and looking for that knockout to get his opponents out of there. He has won his last 2 fights by knockout, and it seems like a lot of it starts with him throwing a barrage of punches to try to goat his opponent into exchanging in the pocket with him. And then from there, he has great vision and great eyes for throwing combinations and landing with precision and accuracy. And that's ultimately what ends up with him leading to those knockout victories. He's taken a grapple-heavy approach in some fights, so we know he has that in his back pocket if he needs it. But the level of competition has also been not that bad, especially with, 2/3 of his pro fights coming under Jungle Fight, which is one of the more well-respected Brazilian promotions. Now, he goes up against Damian Pinas, who comes from the same country as Jairzinho Rozenstruik, Suriname, but actually represents Aruba on the grand stage. He's put together a stellar 7-1 record, with his only loss coming by DQ after he landed an illegal upkick in his 5th pro fight just early last year. He's a powerhouse with his strikes, throws with insane power. He's very athletic, very physical, and that eventually leads to him landing those big shots and putting his opponents away. His grappling is slowly starting to catch up to the rest of his game, but he's still just a blue belt in BJJ. A lot of his success has come from his physical attributes, whether it's his, raw strength or his just power. And all 7 of his wins, he's finished all 7 of his wins, 5 of them actually in the first round as well. I apologize. I'm reading a lot from my written breakdown here because this was the first one that I studied yesterday, and I'm kind of just trying to put the pieces together in my head of what this guy is again. His power and striking obviously needs to be given serious respect. Grappling is often where his opponents try to look to take advantage of him, but he's kind of Derek Lewis his way out of some of these spots when he gets taken down, but he's working on his takedown defense and really working to keep fights in the upright position. This is a close fight, the most competitive on the entire card, but I think it's going to be the athletic gifts of Pinas from his strength, power, and speed that will allow him to land those big shots on Costa and eventually get him out of there. I don't know if Costa wants to incite a chaotic brawl, because I think he'll come out on the losing side of it, but he might be a little bit more educated with how he throws his combinations and the precision in which he lands. But it's hard to pick that against a guy like Pinas, who is clearly more powerful, sharper, and faster with how he lands his power. I'll be looking at the under in this matchup, as I think we'll see this be pretty chaotic from jump, and I think that will lead to one of these guys winning by knockout, and I think it's going to be Pinas who ends up getting the job done here. So give me Pinas and Pinas by knockout. So, as you guys see, I think favorites roll this week. Again, the most competitive fight is in the main event, and we're seeing the odds kind of just go up and down there. But I think it's going to be Pinas who still ends up getting the job done there. And yeah, it should be a fun fight for as long as it lasts. And there are some other fun fights and good performances that could come out of this Week 8 card. All right. That's a wrap on Week 8 of the Contender Series. I'll be back tomorrow for the UFC 320 full card breakdown, so stay tuned for that. And I'll have my final predictions and track plays for this Contender Series card posted on Tuesday afternoon, and I'll pin it in the comments section below if you're interested. Otherwise, I'll see you guys tomorrow for the UFC 320 breakdowns. Peace.